We apologize for not having any videos out now for several weeks because we had Christmas and Thanksgiving, and also I had some medical difficulties that I had to take care of during that time too. But we're back at it again, having a good time, and so I hope you enjoy it. Today, we're going to talk about Winchester only in one aspect, just the aspect of the lever action rifles, because that was really the spot that Winchester got a foothold on the market, and he held it for many years until the Winchester and John Browning partnership was dissolved. And so let me just talk to you a little bit about some of those guns. First of all, a very important person in this was Benjamin Tyler Henry, B. Tyler Henry. B. Tyler Henry went to work for Oliver Winchester. I thought at first it was kind of a partnership, but it really wasn't. He was paying B. Tyler Henry $1,500 or thereabouts a year for his services. B. Tyler Henry was a very valuable man. He had a lot of knowledge. He was a great inventor in his own right, and so B. Tyler Henry was the one that really understood the volcanic patent that led to the first Henry repeating rifle, and because he had a lot to do with the volcanic patent and what they called the rocket ball, which was not a big seller in the volcanic patent. What the rocket ball was, the ammunition for the volcanic, what it amounted to was a conical bullet with a hollow center in the base of the bullet. In that was put a small amount of black powder, then a little piece of cork, and in the middle of that cork they had a percussion cap. And even though it worked fairly well, it was so underpowered that it wasn't really useful for anything. It definitely wasn't useful for warfare or self-protection. And it had so little power that as far as a hunting implement, it didn't work very well at that either. So when Oliver Winchester got a hold of B. Tyler Henry, he told B. Tyler Henry that he wanted him to take that damn full volcanic rifle and make something out of it that was going to be something that would work, something that would sell. And keep in mind that Oliver Winchester himself was not really a gunman. He was a shirt manufacturer, and a famous one in the United States at that time too. But he had a great business mind, and he had quite a bit of money that he had in that. And so he was able to buy controlling stock in the Volcanic Arms Company at that time. And so he asked B. Tyler Henry to come over with him, and he paid him, like I said, about $1,500 a year. And B. Tyler Henry went to work, trying to work this out, and he came up with one of the first rimfire copper-cased cartridges. In this case, it was a 44 flat Henry rimfire. And even though it was good, it was still in its infancy as far as rimfires were concerned, and so sometimes they would get misfires. And so I'll explain to you a little bit about that as we go on. The rifle that he came up with is called the Henry Repeating Rifle. And so now this company is called the New Haven's Arms Company, not Winchester Repeating Arms yet. Don't get too far ahead of me. New Haven's Arms Company. And the first gun that they came up with, that B. Tyler Henry was instrumental in developing the cartridge and everything to make this work, was the Henry repeater. The early Henry repeaters had a butt plate that was rounded on the butt. That's an easy way to recognize an early from a later one. The early ones were rounded. The later ones were sharp on the heel of the butt plate, like this one. And so that's an easy way of telling an early from a late. Just to kind of show you how it operates. It's kind of a unique system, and it's like I say, it's a carryover from the volcanic. If you look at it, these are called This is called the link and toggle or toggle and link system. When it's in this position here, it holds the pressure so that it doesn't kick back. When you open it up after you fired it, you can see that it opens up and it brings back the bolt, and then another cartridge goes up in the carrier, and as you close it, it pushes the other cartridge up, and the bolt pushes it into the rifle, and then it locks. And now this thing, when it's straight, or as straight as it can get, that's the bolt. That's what holds it, the pressure. For a lot of you people who think that back in the 1800s they didn't have a lot of close tolerances and really good workmanship, you ought to be here with me to feel the tightness of all these joints that they have in this link and toggle system and how everything worked so perfectly. And keeping in mind that this was in the 1860s, and you would think that they didn't have a lot of workmanship. This is a piece of art that they had during that time. And so that's why it became so famous. I want to work this one more time for you just so you can see how smooth this is. Now, you can't feel it like I can, but this is smooth as silk. And you look at these joints that are right here, those things are just tight. Of course, they have to be really tight because when you bring it up like this is the locking mechanism that has to straighten this out, and that's what locks it from here to here. And when you bring this out like this, it breaks the locking mechanism and makes the action work. And then you hear it go snap. That's when it locks into that deal. So this was a fine clock in those days. There was only about 12,500 to 13,000 produced in about 5 years, and it was just iconic. They couldn't make them fast enough to keep up with the demand, and so it became really famous. Especially it became famous during the Civil War and then after the Civil Wars on the migration west. It's got a brass frame, 44 caliber barrel. The cartridge it shoots is a 44 flat Henry rimfire, like I said. This is an original one, and this one is serial number 6790. And so it's right in the middle, almost of that group of 12,500 to 13,000. Just as a little side note to let you know how they did during the Civil War, there was about 1,500 to 1,700 of them that was purchased by the United States government on the North to be used in warfare during the Civil War. The Civil War should have had a lot more of them, and if a guy by the name of Ripley would have purchased them, they would have, but he didn't. But there was about another, I understand, about 8,500 of them out of that 12,500 or 13,000 that were purchased privately by like the New York militia and the Massachusetts National Guard and so forth. And they purchased them for their own men in that group of people that they had in that militia or that National Guard. And they sent them to the Civil War with those guns, even furnishing their own ammunition for them. And so what an opportunity that was for those men. And even though it works really smooth and so forth, it's not really the strongest action in the world. And so they had to be really careful on the kind of ammunition they fed it to make sure that they didn't overload it. And later on when we talk about some of the other guns, that'll become more evident than ever. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to give you a different Henry, which is also one I just got for Christmas this year, an original, and it is serial number 1728. That's an early one.
Okay.
Let me show you how this loads. In order to load this thing, you make sure that there's nothing in the chamber, because you don't want to be messing around the muzzle of this gun, and there's nothing in the chamber. You put it down, and generally you put it on your foot or on something else. Then you take this spring. If you notice, there's a spring that goes full length in this magazine, and that spring, you bring this up like this. When you hit the top, twist it sideways. Then you take your cartridges and drop your cartridges in here. Hold 15 in the magazine and 1 in the chamber, if that's what you decide to do to carry it. You hold it at a slight angle so that it goes down and doesn't go too fast, because you're liable to have one of those soft cases detonate that primer and cause a chain fire and get somebody hurt. Then you push this closed, and now keep in mind that this spring bound pushes the cartridges in as you fire the gun until it goes down like this. Now, some of the problems that they had with this, even though it worked very well and people loved it because they had a lot of firepower, in fact, they had so much firepower that when the North was using this during the Civil War, the Yankees was ones that had it. The Confederate soldiers says that they hate that damn Yankee rifle that you load on Sunday and it shoots all week. And that was quite a deal. Now, they were able to capture a few Henry repeaters, but didn't do them a lot of good because Henry was the only one that made ammunition for them. And they didn't make enough of it to share it with the South. And so the South had a good rifle, but nothing to shoot out of it. Now, let me just tell you some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks from the Henry. Drawback: the spring and this open reservoir here to the magazine. That turns out to be a real problem because it collects dirt and grime and crud. And because it has an open area here, if it gets dented, if you drop the gun or something, then it won't function. Plus, there's no forearm on it made out of wood in order to protect you from the heat of the gun if you're shooting it very fast, and so it can burn you. So those things were later on in the 66 Winchester that we'll talk about in just a minute, will help you to understand what was done in order to correct that. Now, let me just tell you one other thing too. During this time, the agreement between B. Tyler Henry and Oliver Winchester was dissolved. Had to do with money. B. Tyler Henry thought he should make more money for what he was doing and what he had done in order to develop the cartridge and make this thing work. Oliver Winchester thought they had made a deal and stuck with it. And so finally, when B. Tyler Henry came to the end of his contract, Oliver Winchester dissolved it, and B. Tyler Henry went his way, and Oliver Winchester went his way. Well, Oliver Winchester decided to go to Europe for an extended vacations. And while he was there, B. Tyler Henry went to the board of directors and tried to do an end run on Oliver Winchester and take over control, basically, of the corporation. Oliver Winchester somehow, I'm not sure how they did this, but they didn't have any communications, found out about it, and came back. And the best way that he could figure to solve the issue is he changed the name to Winchester Repeating Arms. And so from then on, it became Winchester Repeating Arms, and Oliver Winchester did not have B. Tyler Henry as the person who was in charge of production. And so this was the Henry Repeater. It was a great gun. It was used both during the Civil War and after the Civil War on the migration west. There was a bunch of them in Nevada in the Comstock Lode and other places too. And so this became just an iconic weapon, and it's one of the most collectible guns in the world currently because there's not very many of them left, and the ones that are left are generally in hands like mine that won't get rid of them. And so you only seldom see a Henry Repeater even at gun shows.